All senators, please come into the chamber and take your seats for a moment. All right, if I could have everybody's undivided attention, inside the Senate chamber. As mentioned earlier, I have an update for the Senate chamber on our response to the coronavirus situation. Speaker Ralston and I have made a joint decision to suspend the session. This suspension is indefinite and will begin tomorrow after the completion of day 29. So the suspension will begin tomorrow after the completion of day 29. Both chambers have consulted with Governor Kemp and decided that this is the right thing to do in light of the current circumstances. This decision was made out of an abundance of caution and will resume session at a future date. The Speaker and I will be working together to determine when to resume the 2020 session, and when we resume, we will move on with day 30. Many of you will have questions, and my staff will be available to field those questions. We will also be coordinating with the leadership from the majority and the minority parties. We will resume the people's work once we determine a safe and secure way forward, and we will continue to communicate with this chamber throughout the entire process. Thank you very much. What purpose does the senator from the 26th rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, if you suspend, how do we raise money? We got an election May 19th.
I appreciate your question, but we're concerned about the public safety. Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes the senator from the 26th.
Mr. President, I was not trying to be funny. Those of us who have primary opposition and the session suspended, you can't raise any money, period. That's the state law.
The chair appreciates your concern.
So how do we deal with the election and the raising of money for a campaign?
Senator, that's not my priority at this point. Thank you. Chair recognizes the senator from the 18th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we remove SB 451 from the table, please.
Mr. Secretary, please read the caption.
Senate Bill number 451 by Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 3 of Chapter 3 of Title 9 of the OCGA relating to limitations on recovery for deficiencies connected with improvements to realty and resulting injuries and for other purposes. Mr. President, on March 5th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator Stone of the 23rd Chair. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 18th has moved that Senate Bill 451 be taken off the table. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and Senate Bill 451 is taken off the table. The chair recognizes the senator from the 18th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have something called a statute of repose in Georgia, which is an outside time limit in which to file actions. That has always been interpreted to apply only to tort actions, but there was a decision that came from the Court of Appeals a few months ago that in fact applied the statute of repose also to actions in contract, meaning that one can't pursue someone for contractual terms beyond 8 years. This is interpreted completely differently from the way Georgia law has always been interpreted. And if you wonder, well, what does that have to do with us today and how might that affect our constituents? And the answer is this. Take, for example, if you've recently bought a warranty or had your roof redone on your house, and you bought a 30-year extended warranty and you paid money for that, and you've got a contract and a warranty that says you've got 30 years, that warranty is now no longer good after 8 years. You cannot do anything to enforce it beyond 8 years. This corrects the misdirection, if you will, of Georgia law by the Georgia Court of Appeals opinion, places it back where it's always been, so that if you have contractual rights, particularly with regard to warranties that go beyond 8 years, you've got a right to enforce that against the person that you bought that warranty from. Mr. President, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Senator.
Sorry, Senator, you have no questions. Does any other senator wish to speak to Senate Bill 451? Chair sees none. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Chair recognizes the senator from the, we'll come back to order. Chair will recognize the senator from the 18th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we please remove SR 841 from the table.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Resolution 841?
Senate Resolution number 841 by Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others. A resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution so as to provide that the people of this state may petition the judiciary for declaratory relief from certain acts of this state or certain local governments or officers or employees thereof that violate the Constitution of the state or the Constitution of the United States and for other purposes. Mr. President, on March 2nd, 2020, the Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this resolution do pass by substitute, respectfully submitted by Senator Stone of the 23rd Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary offers the following substitute to Senate Resolution 841. A resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution so as to provide that the people of the state may petition the judiciary for relief from certain acts of the state or certain local governments or officers or employees thereof that violate the laws or the Constitution of this state or the Constitution of the United States and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to taking Senate Resolution 841 off the table? The chair hears none, and it is off the table. The chair recognizes the senator. Oh, there's an amendment. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the amendment?
Mr. President, Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others offer the following amendment to amend the Senate Committee on Judiciary substitute to Senate Resolution 841 by replacing lines 1 through 5 with the following. Proposing an amendment to the Constitution so as to waive sovereign immunity and allow petitions to the Superior Court for relief from certain acts of the state or certain local governments or officers or employees thereof that violate the laws of the state, the Constitution of Georgia, or the Constitution of the United States, and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Is there objection to taking Senate Resolution 841 off the table? The chair hears none. The chair recognizes the senator from the 18th to speak to the resolution and the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, colleagues. I bring to you Senate Resolution 841, which is going to be very familiar to everybody in this chamber except for maybe just the newest of our senators. In fact, most of you have voted on substantially this same measure in the past. The history of this attempt goes back at least a few years, where we passed at least 2 years ago an attempt to have a waiver of sovereign immunity under limited circumstances in our state. I believe it came out of this chamber unanimously. It was vetoed by Governor Deal. A more narrowed, tailored version of the bill came out, again, I think unanimously out of this chamber in the House last year, and it too was vetoed by Governor Kemp. So this is an attempt to establish a limited waiver of sovereign immunity as a defense to certain actions, and now in the form of a constitutional amendment. As I said, it is very narrowly tailored. Representative Andy Welch has worked on this extensively for the last few years. I commend him and all of his work. And so what I bring to you is the resolution, and it received some work and involvement from our Judiciary Chair, the senator from the 23rd, as well as some other senators that quite frankly thought what we had presented was too limited and really didn't provide the citizens of Georgia an opportunity to check their government in the event that they're acting outside the bounds of what's constitutional. So in addition to the basics that's been in the bill all along, you'll see what the amendment is beginning at line 10 on the amendment, which I appreciate, again, the senator from the 23rd and the senator from the 46th co-signing on this. With regard to line 10, it simply changes it so that we clarify that we're not creating a new cause of action, but rather sovereign immunity is waived as a defense that can be asserted by the state. Secondly, the sections beginning with lines 13 through 17 on the amendment simply allows for injunctive relief to be granted by the courts if declaratory judgment is granted and authorized by the court. And finally, with regard to the amendment, lines 20 through 26 simply allows equitable relief and also has a check that we have with this General Assembly found in the last grammatical sentence. It says, the General Assembly by an act may limit the power or duty of a court under this paragraph to dismiss any action or deny relief. As I said, this has a good history. This is something that I think we all agree with, we have in the past, And the concept is actually even more narrowly tailored as found in the original bill than previously presented. I believe it came out of the House unanimously as well. It's simply founded in the thought that if our government is acting beyond the scope of what the Constitution says it can, we ought to be able to call that into question. And with that, Mr. President, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 10th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. When the senator yield,
Yes, sir.
Senator, is it not true that you've been presenting a lot of bills today?
Yes, sir. And I tell you what, Senator, my good friend from the 10th, if you'll vote for this one, I think I can assure you this is the last time you'll hear from me today here at the well.
Senator, further yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator, I heard you mention sovereign immunity, and I just want to make sure that this sovereign immunity doesn't have anything to do with the city of Stockbridge.
No, sir. I don't think so, Senator. Thank you. I appreciate the
Thank
spirit
you,
and
Senator.
humor of the question, though.
You
We
have
need it-
no more questions.
Thank you. Please vote for the bill. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Resolution 841 or the amendment? The chair hears none. All right, we're going to take up amendment number 1. Is there objection to adopting amendment number 1? The chair hears none, and amendment number 1 is adopted. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Chair hears none. The committee substitute as amended is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing the report of the committee which is favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question now being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Question is on the adoption of the resolution by substitute. All those in favor of the resolution will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. Now that I know my handwriting is in the journals. I'm going to go with the next bill. On the adoption of the resolution by substitute, the yeas are 50, the nays are 1. This resolution, having received the requisite 2/3 constitutional majority, is therefore adopted. Can I call another bill up? One more bill? Who's the senator? For what purpose does the senator from the 20th rise?
Mr. President, I ask for unanimous consent to remove Senate Bill 446 from the table.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 446?
Senate Bill 446 by Senator Walker of the 20th and others. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Code Section 1764 of the OCGA relating to the authorization of posting cash bonds generally, furnishing of receipt to person posting bond, recordation of receipt of bond on docket, and disposal of unclaimed bonds, so as to provide for unclaimed cash bonds and for other purposes. Mr. President, on March 5th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Public Safety recommends that this bill do pass by substitute, respectively submitted by Senator Albers, Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 446. A bill to be titled an Act to amend Code Section 1764 of the OCGA relating to the authorization of posting cash bonds generally, furnishing of receipt to person posting bond, recordation of receipt of bond on docket, and disposal of unclaimed bonds so as to provide for unclaimed cash bonds and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
The senator from the 20th has moved that Senate Bill 446 be taken off the table. Is there objection? The chair hears none, and it's taken off the table. The chair recognizes the senator from the 20th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. You like the color of my tie? Hey, Senate Bill 446. The idea for this legislation was brought to me by a constituent of mine who is she's actually the clerk of the court in our state court in Houston County, but the clerks of the Superior Court support this also. Apparently, under current law, unclaimed cash bonds, they are required to hold them for 7 years. This bill simply reduces that time frame that they have to hold unclaimed cash bonds when the case has already been disposed of by a judge. They would have to hold them for 2 years. Oftentimes they cannot find the person that put up the bond. It might be a family member or a friend or the actual defendant, I guess, themselves, and they may have even left the country. But this allows them to put the money in the general fund of the county after 2 years and after sending them a certified letter and waiting another 90 days. I ask for your favorable consent to this bill. Thank you.
You have a question. Chair recognizes the senator from the 31st for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, this would allow the county to take possession of that bond, move it to the general fund 5 years earlier.
The case has already been disposed of by a judge. They would have to then wait 2 years for somebody to claim the bond, and then they would have to send a letter, certified letter, and then wait 90 more days. If they don't hear from anybody, then they could turn the funds into the general fund of the county, yes. This doesn't have anything to do with the bail bonds or professional sureties. This is where somebody just put up a cash bond.
But it shortens that opportunity for the person that put up that bond. It shortens their opportunity to get that money back by 5 years.
That's correct.
Thank you.
You have no more questions.
Thank you. I ask for your favorable vote.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 446? The chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 48, the nays are 3. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. For what purpose does the senator from the 51st rise?
Mr. President, I make a motion that we move SB 415 from the table.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 415?
Senate Bill number 415 by Senator Gooch of the 51st and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend various titles of the OCGA so as to streamline the process of litigation and reduce costs for Georgia's industries, small businesses, and citizens. To amend Title 9 of the OCGA relating to civil practice. To amend Title 15 of the OCGA relating to courts. To amend Title 36 of the OCGA relating to local government. And for other purposes. Okay. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 415. A bill to be titled an act to amend various titles of the OCGA so as to streamline the process of litigation and reduce costs for Georgia's industries, small businesses, and citizens. To amend Title 9 of the OCGA relating to civil practice so as to change certain provisions relating to the tolling of limitations for tort actions and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Kennedy of the 18th and others offer the following amendment number 1 to amend the committee substitute to Senate Bill 415 by inserting at the end of line 461, 4, noting in this code section, nothing in this code section shall be construed to limit the provisions of 22 USC 761. Mr. President, Senator Robertson, the 29th, and others offer the following amendment number 2 to amend the committee substitute to Senate Bill 415 by striking lines 478 through 507. Mr. President, Senator Harbin of the 16th and others offer the following amendment number 3 to amend the committee substitute to Senate Bill 415. At the end of line 461, add a semicolon and add, provided that nothing in this section shall eliminate any liability for any landowner that knew or should have known that property was being used in furtherance of illegal drug trafficking or human trafficking. That please order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 51st has moved that Senate Bill 415 be taken off the table. Is there objection? There is objection. All those in favor of removing Senate Bill 415 from the table, vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. Chair recognizes the Senator from the 45th.
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, we are in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. We are at 5 o'clock in the afternoon on crossover day. Is it a wise decision to have the most important bill of the session regarding tort reform put on our desk and asked to vote for, and there's at least a dozen amendments up there? Is that not true?
The Senator speaks with great compassion. On the motion to remove from the table, the yeas are 18, the nays are 31, and the motion is lost. Senate Bill 415 will stay on the table. Chair recognizes the Senator from the 35th for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that we remove Senate Bill 349, substitute from the table.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 349?
Senate Bill number 349 by Senator James of the 35th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Part 3 of Article 16 of Chapter 2, Title 20 of the OCGA relating to health so as to require local boards of education to provide feminine hygiene products in certain restrooms used by students and for other purposes. Mr. President, on March 5th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Education and Youth recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Martin of the 9th Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Education and Youth offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 349. A bill to be titled an act to amend Part 3 of Article 16 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to health so as to require local boards of education to provide feminine hygiene products to students at no charge to the students and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 35th has moved that Senate Bill 349 be taken from the table. Is there objection? Chair hears none, and it's taken off the table. The chair recognizes the senator from the 35th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President, senators. Senate Bill 349 requires feminine hygiene products to be provided in certain school restrooms. This legislation requires every local board of education to provide feminine products in every female designated restroom used by students in any grade 6 through 12. These products must be free to the students. And there is a federal grant available for this, and it's already being used in the state of Georgia and is distributed through the Department of Education. 4 states have already passed this legislation: California, Illinois, New York, New Hampshire, and Virginia just passed one last week. We will be the 5th to pass the exact legislation. 29 other states have passed legislation similar to this that requires schools to provide free menstrual products in women bathrooms or nurses' stations or counselors' offices. So this legislation requires no fiscal note because there is a federal grant. I will take any questions, but I'd like to ask that we do pass to help the young women who don't go to school during certain times every month because they don't have these products. So please consider voting yes, and I will yield the well if there are no questions.
Senator, you have no questions. Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a co-sponsor of this bill, I rise to urge you to please vote yes for all the reasons cited by my learned senator. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 349? The chair sees none. The question now is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 47, the nays are 3. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Chair recognizes the senator from the 9th.
Thanks, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to remove Senate Bill 413 from the table.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 413?
Senate Bill 413 by Senator Martin of the 9th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 67A of Title 36 of the OCGA relating to conflicts of interest in zoning actions so as to expand the definition of the term applicant and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 25th, 2020, the Senate Committee on SLOGO recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator Anderson of the 24th Chair. That please order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 9th has asked that Senate Bill 413 be taken off the table. Is there objection? Chair hears none, and Senate Bill 413 is taken off the table. The chair recognizes the senator from the 9th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. When a person applies for rezoning on a piece of property, current law requires that the applicant and their representation, like their attorney or somebody else they hired to represent them in the case, they must disclose any campaign contributions to the local authority that's making the zoning decision. A constituent in Gwinnett County pointed out to me that the fact that the property owner, who is often not the entity applying for the rezoning, this bill simply clarifies that the owner of the property will be considered an applicant and will be subject to the reporting requirements. If there are any questions, there are no questions, I'll yield the will.
Senator, you have no questions. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 413? Chair sees none. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 48, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate Resolution 854 be removed from the table.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Resolution 854?
Senate Resolution 854 by Senator Cowsert of the 46th and others. A resolution applying for a convention of the states under Article 5 of the United States Constitution and for other purposes. Mr. President, on March 5th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Rules recommends that this resolution do pass, respectfully submitted by Senator Mullis, Chair. Mr. President, Senator Cowsert of the 46th offers the following amendment number 1 to amend Senate Resolution 854 by striking lines 8 through 12, by replacing amendments with an amendment on lines 14 and 20, by replacing line 16 with Constitution to place clear restraints on Congress to operate pursuant to a balanced budget subject to exceptions necessary to respond to emergencies and provide for national defense and for other purposes. That please order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 46th has asked that move that Senate Resolution 854 be taken off the table. Is there objection? There is objection. There is objection. Would the senator like to speak to his motion? Oh. Non-debatable. Go to the boards. All those in favor of the motion of removing Senate Resolution 854 from the table, vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion to take Senate Resolution 854 off the table, the yeas are 26, the nays are 22, and the motion has prevailed. Senate Resolution 854 is removed from the table. Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the major problems facing our nation today is our national debt. At the federal level, it has spiraled out of control over really the last 10 to 15 years. This year, it was in the paper yesterday, our national debt will exceed $1 trillion. It is now over $23 trillion, our national debt. That is $1 million per household in the United States. The federal government has simply found itself unable to restrain the spending and live within their means. We are passing this debt down to generations to come, and it's going to weaken our country's ability to respond to emergencies and external threats if we bankrupt ourselves. I'm calling for an amendment to the United States Constitution to require the federal government to live within its means, to have balanced budgets with exceptions for national emergencies, something like coronavirus, or national defense. This can be done one of two ways. The United States Congress itself can propose an amendment to the states to ratify, similar to what we talked about last year on the Equal Rights Amendment. It would take 3/4 of the states to ratify any amendment proposed by the United States Congress. This application is to request the alternative method be used, and that is for the states to call a convention for that limited purpose of proposing an amendment to the states. Still requires 3/4 of the states to agree to that, to ratify that Constitution. The convention would come up with the precise terms of that. We have had a group of states that have been meeting for several years, have set the rules and procedures to be used at that convention. This is single subject matter specific, asking only for there to be an amendment on the balancing the budget presented or considered by these states. That's the reason for Amendment 1, which I will go speak to. I heard feedback in the halls and from constituents. They wanted to make sure that this was not a runaway convention to totally revamp our United States Constitution. So the amendment tightens it up and specifies the states that already have balanced budget amendment applications in to the United States Congress and makes it clear that we're restrained to only that one subject matter. Several years ago, we passed an almost identical resolution to this one, and it passed overwhelmingly. Along with that was a Delegate Limitation Act, and that's found in Official Code of Georgia 28-6-8, which would apply. That law sets forth how you appoint delegates to go to this convention for the states and limits them to follow the instructions of this legislature that they only consider the single subject matter that we request in this application. It is a very concise application here. It will go with those of many other states that are begging the national federal government to try to live within our means. I'm willing to answer any questions, Mr. President. Otherwise, I'll yield the well and ask for your favorable consideration.
You have a question. Chair recognizes the senator from the 27th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman, do you yield?
I yield to my co-sponsor.
Thank you. There's been a lot of concerns from folks on both sides of the aisle over a quote-unquote runaway convention. Can you outline for me what you think the backstops are to a runaway convention?
Absolutely. Well, you would have a convention of the states, delegates from each state. In fact, the senator from the 52nd here attended on behalf of Georgia a couple of years ago to set forth the rules and regulations and procedures that would be followed. Basically, each state would get one vote. They would have different delegations of delegates as provided by their state law. We have one that would provide that the governor, the lieutenant governor, and speaker appoint our delegates. Our delegates, another backstop, will be limited in their ability to consider issues at that convention by our state law. If they were to vary from that, they may be recalled so that they can honor only the pledge that they've given. The other thing of importance is whatever the terms of the agreement would be, it'd have to be agreed on by the convention, the proposed amendment. 3/4 of the states have to approve that. So if they were to defy our guidance here and our request for a single subject, they would still have to have 3/4 of the states agree to any changes to our Constitution. It's very misplaced to think that this could be a runaway convention, et cetera. There's discussion occasionally about the original Constitutional Convention, that they considered many issues and they essentially rewrote the Articles of Confederation. Well, that's true. That was the purpose of that convention, was to rewrite our Constitution and come up with something more workable. This would not be the purpose of this amendment convention, just one amendment to be considered.
Do you further yield?
I do.
Are you saying, is it accurate that I'm hearing you say that even if hypothetically we had a runaway convention and the convention voted to remove the First Amendment, something we would all say is egregious, 3/4 of the states would be required to ratify that after the fact?
Absolutely. It would. This convention does not have the power to amend the Constitution, only to recommend or submit a proposed amendment to the states, which 3/4 of them would have to agree to.
Do you further yield?
I will.
Isn't it true that it's the state legislatures that would participate in the ratification process
That is correct.
after a convention? Do you further yield?
I do yield.
Isn't it true that the current composition of state legislatures in the United States of America is 60% Republican, 40% Democrat, and therefore, in order to clear the 3/4 hurdle, any amendment that would ultimately get ratified would have to have some sort of bipartisan support from the legislatures?
Absolutely, and those numbers obviously change from years to year, but you've got to have bipartisan support. States, both blue and red, have to agree to make any change to our Constitution.
Senator, do you further yield?
I do.
Isn't it true that we can hold the Constitution in the highest regard, but recognize that there may be need for amendments for the states to take their 10th Amendment rights, their conceptual 10th Amendment rights, which have been taken away from us, and or to impose things upon Washington, D.C. as the sovereign states of this country that Washington, D.C. may not be willing to impose on themselves?
Absolutely. Remember, we're a government, a country made up of states, and we have power to let this Constitution be a living document. And if needed, to reel it back in, the Constitution itself gives us this power under Article 5. It's the way you can do it if the federal government, the Congress, fails to act on their own.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Do you continue to yield?
I yield.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 42nd to speak to the measure. Sorry, for a question. It's been a long day.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I yield.
Senator, I wanted to ask a little bit about how this mechanism would work in the case of emergencies. Of course, right now we're facing the coronavirus pandemic, and there's a lot of talk about the federal government needs to be nimble to roll out emergency packages that might include some spending. If this amendment were to come into pass, wouldn't it be true that they would either not be able to get emergency spending down, or they'd have to somehow raise taxes to accommodate for that?
No, thank you for that question, Senator. No, that's not true. And if you'll look at lines 3 through 5 of my amendment here, it makes it clear that Congress would operate pursuant to a balanced budget, subject to exceptions necessary to respond to emergencies and provide for the national defense. So those are unwarranted concerns. Now, we don't have the exact language of the proposed amendment. That would be negotiated by delegates from all the states as they met and considered the issue to come up with the appropriate language. And so we trust in that process. I mean, it's a democracy. All 50 states would be able to have input and would have to agree on the language, but we make it clear here that any proposed amendment must have contingencies for emergencies and the national defense. They can come up with the precise wording for that. And then, of course, it would have to be acceptable to 3/4 of the states before it became the law.
Thank you. Does the gentleman yield for one more?
Be happy to.
I did see this that you mentioned emergencies, and that is a good change to that. I wonder though.
That was in response to some of the concerns that people made. They just wanted to make sure that this wouldn't box us in or limit our ability to respond in circumstances of emergency or
right, and so
defense.
To that emergency point, I mean, it seems to me that what we're currently facing right now as a country certainly would be encompassed in an emergency. I'm a little less certain that that the '08 through 2010 or '07 through 10 recession would meet emergency. It might, but it might not. It's just the way that would be interpreted. And isn't it true that our state got over 20% of its funding that we used to continue basic services during the recession from the federal government stimulus package?
I think that's true, and I think that our families also absorb 20% of that debt that we're passing on to our children and grandchildren. That's going to limit their ability to react to things in the future. I mean, this is truly, I am not casting stones at any particular administration for having run up this debt. This is equally responsibility for the current Republican administration, for the previous Democratic administration, the Republican one before that. We haven't had a balanced budget since 1992 when Bill Clinton was president and John Kasich was the budget chair in the Senate.
Well, I mean, I agree with you that it is interesting to watch the talk and how it changes depending on which party is in power, because it was very interesting, all the talk about the deficit when we had President Obama, but then the talk did change quite a bit during the last tax cut, and currently we're on a path to explode the debt much more than we did before. So absolutely agree with you. It is true that both parties are guilty, and we do need to talk about it.
Nothing's more frustrating than the politicians that go on the campaign trail, they're going to clean up the federal debt, and then they go vote for a budget that doesn't. The beauty of our system is our Constitution requires a balanced budget. In fact, 49 of the states also do, and every one of them lives within their means. And yeah, we have tough times where we have to make cuts in programs, and we prioritize what's most important to do that, and we have done pretty darn good, if you ask me, going through some really tough times back in the Great Recession. We continued to provide the necessary services, education, health care, public safety that we had to do. And then when times got good again, we began to expand our services and our spending. Now we're in one of those little kind of rocky periods. It looks like we're in a flat level, and so we're struggling in this budget process with our priorities. But we're doing it responsible, and we're doing it whether or not you got a D by your name or an R by your name. If you looked at the vote on the budget this morning, it was one no vote. We all came in bipartisan support and agreed to do it, and I'd like to see us start doing that at the federal level. Let's give them a little nudge. Let's give them an urge, and let's urge them to be as responsible as the states are. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. The chair recognizes the minority leader to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I did have a question for the senator, and maybe he'll get a chance to respond now. I believe that there's an amendment on our floor that the original resolution included term limits and other factors, and the amendment takes term limits out. But I believe it to be the case that this bill also allows states that want to just deal with the budget for the purposes of getting to the convention to be combined with other states that have other purposes. And I think that's problematic. You know, if we're trying to address in our chamber one issue dealing with the federal deficit, to combine it with other states, maybe all the other states that apply for the special convention to have another purpose, that's a real problem. In other words, we're lending our voice to a group of people that may not have the same interest we have in mind. That's a real problem, especially that many constitutional experts say that these constitutional conventions cannot be controlled from our state once they start, and they could come up with a lot of issues. Now, it's true, as the senator stated, there would be a safeguard that this would come back to the states for final act and approval. But I think that if we're going to pass a constitutional recommendation for a convention, we should do it on the issue that we want to deal with and not join with others that have other various issues or have different calls. I think that's very, very problematic. I also think it's very, very tough position to be in for an up or down vote. Any amendment will come back to us. There will be no changes allowed. It will be one thing. There may be a lot of political pressures at play that we can't make sure, as the senator from the 42nd asked earlier, that all the safeguards are in place to make sure national emergencies and everything else. So I think there's some danger there. But I certainly don't think we should pass a constitutional amendment, a constitutional convention request and join into other states that have other purposes and want to do other things. I think that's problematic.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 46th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
I certainly look forward to yielding to the senator from 46.
First, my apologies for leaving the well when you had a question. I was unaware of any further questions, but in response, if you would look at lines 17 and 18 on the amendment, it addresses your concern. You raised that in Rules Committee, and I reacted to your concerns to try to make sure we kept this narrow enough and had bipartisan support. But it indicates there that this requires the calling of a convention shall not be aggregated with any application on any other subjects.
Okay.
So if there are states that have applications on other subject matters, they would not be considered as one of the 2/3 of the states that it requires to join in calling for a constitutional amendment convention on just balancing the federal budget. So I have built a safeguard in there for you so that it doesn't get lumped in and we end up having multiple subject matters considered. And if anybody else had other areas where they wanted to amend the Constitution, they should file a separate application for that so that we don't get bogged down and confused in multiple subjects.
Thank you for that clarification. I still feel that these amendments, these constitutional conventions can go beyond the scope and desire we want. By previous decisions, these conventions cannot be limited to the subject matters we call them for. Therefore, I do have concerns about it, and I, wanted to voice those concerns. I'll be voting against it, and want you to reflect very seriously about this very important matter. Thank you.
Senator has yielded the well. The chair recognizes the senator from the 52nd to speak to the bill. The resolution, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. You may have heard in D.C. that there are two groups who are totally addicted to spending, the Democrats and the Republicans. They ask for everything, and then they get together and say that everybody pretty much gets everything they wanted, and then they call it compromise, and the debt goes up. As the senator from the 46 said, we're at $23 trillion. We have had a recent attempt in 2012 with a sequestration that was going to limit spending to, I believe, 2% increases. Both parties realized they just didn't have any control, and they would do this. So we had been at over $1 trillion in 2012. It was 2013, it went down to 680, 2014 down to 485, 2015 down to 442. We were making good progress, and they couldn't stand it because they couldn't get the money they wanted to spend on everything, and so they said, we're just going to tweak it a little bit and loosen it up. And so then we went from 442 up to 585 to 665 in 2017 to 779 in 2018 to 984 in 2019, and now we're over $1 trillion. The Congressional Budget Office says that in 5 years, everything we borrow won't even be paying the interest on the debt. And there's people talking about a death spiral in 5 years, severe economic consequences. So when we've got Republicans and Democrats in 49 states that have to have a balanced budget, that are responsible, I've got a lot more faith in them that we're not going to have 3/4 of those states do something crazy, that they would ratify something that's that way. I don't have the fears there that I have about the present pathway of our federal government and the excessive borrowing that is going to put us in a really bad economic position soon. We've shown restraint in both parties in state governments, and they need to be the parent. In the past, I think on the Women's Right Convention, they came up a state short of getting there, and at that point, Congress realized they had to act. So sometimes I think you can just get within one state of it, and maybe they will take an action on their own. But we were at 28 states. It takes 34. I think this is too important an issue to not go forward and protect the economy of the United States. There's triggers in place for things when they happen. I would ask that in a bipartisan manner that we do support this and put Georgia on the list of those who want the federal government, both parties, to start acting responsible. With that, I'll yield the well.
Senator has yielded the well. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Resolution 854? Chair sees none. Stand by. The senator from the 46th, the author of the measure and the amendment, has been made aware that the amendment exceeds half the length of the bill, and therefore the bill would automatically suspend and is placed on the general calendar. He's working to amend his amendment. Stand by for a few minutes. Senate will come back to order. The chair recognizes the senator from the 46th to speak to his amendment, amendment number 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. To keep this from exceeding the length needed and make it a floor substitute, I deleted the last 2 lines that reflected rescission of any previous applications. I don't know if we even have any previous applications still on the book, but we'll just not deal with those at this time. Thank you, Mr. President.
You have a question.
All right.
The chair recognizes the minority leader for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Yes, Mr. Leader, you can ask
I've
anything
also
you
done
want
this
to
in the
now.
parliamentary inquiry. Isn't it true that the bill that will cause it to the amendment that will cause it to lay over is preferable to some of us?
For you, it might be, but I thought you liked responsible government, Mr. Leader.
You have no more questions.
Thank you. I yield.
All right, Mr. Secretary, will you read Amendment 1A?
46 offer the following amendment number 1 to Senate Resolution 854 by deleting lines 19 and 20. That please order, Mr. President.
Any senators want to speak to the resolution or Amendment 1 or 1A? The chair sees none. All right, we'll take up Amendment number 1A. Is there objection to Amendment 1A? The chair hears none, and Amendment 1A is adopted. We'll take up Amendment number 2. Is there objection to adopting Amendment number 1? Chair hears none, and Amendment number 1 is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Question is on the adoption of the resolution as amended. All those in favor of the resolution will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. On the adoption of the resolution as amended, the yeas are 26, the nays are 22. This resolution, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore adopted as amended. Is that a two? Chair recognizes the senator from the 31st.
Did you say it was adopted?
It is adopted. This is a majority vote.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. The secretary says he edits his opinion. On the adoption of the resolution as amended, the yeas are 26, the nays are 22. This resolution having failed, the requisite constitutional majority is therefore lost. Chair recognizes the senator from the 31st.
I move to reconsider SR 854.
Senator has moved that we reconsider H.R. 854. All those in favor of reconsidering the passage of Senate Resolution 854 will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion, the yeas are 27, the nays are 22. This motion has prevailed, and the Senate will reconsider SR 854. Senate Resolution 854 now moves on to the general calendar. (6-7.5). It now returns back to the general calendar. Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 384? Chair recognizes the senator from the 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate Bill 384 be taken from the table.
Mr. Secretary, can you please read the caption?
Senate Resolution 384 by Senator Ligon of the 3rd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 2 of Chapter 8 of Title 12 of the OCGA relating to general provisions relative to solid waste management so as to prohibit the location of any municipal solid waste disposal facility or any coal combustion residual landfill within a certain distance of a Blackwater River and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 25th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and the Environment recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. It was submitted by Senator Harper, the 7th chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and the Environment offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 384. A bill titled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 2 of Chapter 8 of Title 12 of the OCGA relating to general provisions relative to solid waste management so as to prohibit the location of any municipal solid waste disposal facility or any coal combustion residual landfill within a certain distance of a Blackwater River and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 3rd has moved that Senate Bill 384 be taken from the table. Is there objection? Chair hears none, and Senate Bill 384 is removed from the table. The chair recognizes the senator from the 3rd to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are certain areas of our state that are beautiful, environmentally sensitive, and worthy of our protection. And there's Blackwater River in our area that's worthy of that, where people go for recreation. They fish, swim, canoe, camp. People live in the area to be able to enjoy this resource. A Blackwater River has a lot of high dissolved tannins in it. It's low oxygenated. It's sensitive. These areas they have porous soils, lots of wetlands, and it's not an area that's conducive to landfills. There are other areas that are suitable for that, and this bill would just create a corridor that would protect those rivers from landfills. Mr. President, I'll be glad to answer any questions. If not, I'll yield the well.
You have no questions.
I yield the well.
Any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 384? Chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 40, the nays are 11, and this bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd.
Mr. President, I move that Senate Bill 484 be removed from the table.
Mr. Secretary, can you read the caption of Senate Bill 484?
Senate Bill number 484 by Senator Kirkpatrick, the 32nd, and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 31 of the OCGA relating to health, so as to adopt the solemn covenant of the states to award prizes for curing diseases, provide for the entry of the state into multi-state compact to incentivize the development of cures for diseases through substantial financial awards, provide for a commission to administer the compact, and for other purposes. Mr. President, on March 5th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Interstate Cooperation recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator Sims of the 12th. That can be sorted, Mr. President.
Senator from the 32nd has moved that Senate Bill 484 be removed from the table. Is there objection? Chair hears none, and it's taken off the table. The chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 484 is known as the Cure Bill, and this idea came up during the Lieutenant Governor's Health Innovation Task Force last summer. This bill enables a compact of states who incentivize the private sector to develop cures for 10 diseases, with a prize paid for from shared savings that happen downstream from the cure. 6 states are required to make the compact work. Ohio has passed the bill, and 14 other states have introduced the bill. There's a big advantage to being one of the original states to join the compact because you're in the decision-making process and also get any cures developed at cost without having to pay royalties. Currently, much basic science research is conducted by NIH and research universities through grants typically provided by the government or nonprofit foundations.
Most clinical trials are done by private sector companies, but often the motivation is for ongoing treatments rather than cures for financial reasons. This concept is designed to align incentives for the development of cures. The compact is necessary to make the prize big enough to motivate development. Smallpox was the last disease that was cured back in the 1950s. Georgia is spending a massive amount of money on treatment of diseases in our state health plan and Medicaid programs. The committee heard positive testimony from Emory University and from the ALS Association, and I've not heard any groups opposed to the bill. If you can find it among your many papers, there is a summary of the bill on your desk, and I would appreciate your support and be happy to answer any questions.
You have no questions.
I yield the well, thank you.
Any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 484? The chair sees none. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 50, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Chair recognizes the senator from the 23rd.
Mr. President, I move that SB 379 be taken from the table.
Ms. Secretary, can you please read the caption?
Senate Bill number 379 by Senator Stone of the 23rd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 43 of the OCGA relating to professions and businesses so as to change certain provisions relating to barbers and cosmetologists and for other purposes. Mr. President, on March 6, 2020, the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Cowsert at the 46th chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 379. A bill to be titled an act to amend Title 43 of the OCGA relating to professions and businesses so as to change certain provisions relating to barbers and cosmetologists and for other purposes. Mr. President, Senator Harbin of the 16th and others offer the following amendment number 1 to amend the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and the Utilities substitute to Senate Bill 379 by deleting A on line 916 and inserting in lieu thereof A. By deleting lines 921 through 923 and inserting in lieu thereof the following. That completes order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 23rd has moved that Senate Bill 379 be taken off the table. Is there objection? There is objection. All those in favor of taking Senate Bill 379 off the table, vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion to remove from the table, the yeas are 45, the nays are 5. The motion has prevailed, and Senate Bill 379 is taken off the table. Chair recognizes the senator from the 23rd to speak to Senate Bill 379.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, Senate Bill 379 is an agency bill brought to us by the Cosmetology Board. Deals with clarifying definitions where they appear throughout the code, particularly with respect to the professions of barber 2 and master barber. Also inserts definition of salon suite. That is included to crack down on the proliferation of unlicensed shops. In the cosmetology profession, the professional and the shop have to be separately licensed. So through the bill, it requires each shop to have a separate license, even if co-located with other shops. And it also provides for fines for violation of that. It also addresses a problem, sanitation in the area of using live animals to perform services that are regulated by the code. In particular, the practice of using fish pedicures, something that cannot be done in a sanitary way. It also recognizes military personnel, active or retired, or their spouses who have licenses from other states. This is coordinated with the senator from the 14th bill, which passed earlier. All that's going to be required now is an endorsement, that is, presentation of the license from the other state. It inserts definitions for cosmetology apprentice and clarifies some of the requirements of schools, instructors, and courses and course requirements. With that, I'll yield to any questions.
Senator, you have some interesting questions coming at you. The chair recognizes the pro tem for a question.
Does the senator yield?
I suppose so.
Holy mackerel. Is this a fish bill?
There's something.
What's the
There's something fishy about it. I can
What's
tell
the
you
purpose of this bill? I mean, if you use those fish pedicures, isn't it true you can get a case of the clams?
And you can't and you can't use birds either.
Do you continue to yield?
Sure.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 53rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield. Senator Yield.
Yes.
They're making fun of me over here. Isn't it true that this bill could put what? I forgot the word. Oh yeah, I got it. Isn't it true that this could put sushi bars out of business?
Not unless people put the feet in the sushi. It's not like stomping grapes. I don't think. You don't.
All right, look, I'm not talking about drinking, Senator. Further, you.
Sure.
Now, what kind of fish are these? Are they piranhas?
You know, I think they're car.
Carp?
Car.
Car. Okay. I have no more questions. I can't think anything funny about this.
Well, it's serious business. I appreciate.
Do you continue to yield?
I guess, yeah.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 19th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
Certainly.
Mr. Chairman, I see in here it talks about barbershop and master barbershops and barbershop 2. Does this bill have anything to do with our film tax credit?
Film tax credit, well, I haven't seen where it applies.
Do you continue to yield?
I think we've exhausted the subject, but I'll yield.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 31st.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Yes.
When we cut off the employment opportunities for these garrofish, what is one to do with their garrofish?
Well, I guess they could fry them.
Okay, thank you, sir. That's what I wanted to know.
That was a great answer. You have no more questions, Senator?
I urge your support for Senate Bill 379.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 379? The chair sees none. Is there objection to amendment number 1? The chair hears none. Amendment number 1 is adopted. The question now is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Chair hears none. The committee substitute as amended is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. How many does list 7 have on it? 2? So we've got 2 more bills, and then I'll call you up just like a standard. 3 more bills. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 40, the nays are 12. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd.
Mr. President, I move that Senate Bill 476 be removed from the table.
Ms. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 476?
Senate Bill number 476 by Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Article 1 of Chapter 11 of Title 4 of the OCGA relating to general provisions relative to animal protection, so as to provide for pet dealers to microchip dogs and cats and for other purposes. Mr. President, on March 5th, 2020, the Senate Committee on Science and Technology recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator Unchman of the 45th Chair. Mr. President, Senator Kirkpatrick of the 32nd and others offer the following amendment to amend Senate Bill 476 by deleting 7.2 on line 15. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 32nd has moved that Senate Bill 476 be taken from the table. Is there objection? Chair hears none, and the bill is removed from the table. Chair recognizes the senator from the 32nd to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 476 relates to microchipping of dogs and cats by licensed commercial breeders and rescue organizations, and requires this to be done before sale or adoption or transfer of the animal. The most common cause of euthanasia of dogs and cats is lack of identification. Microchipping is cheap, does not require sedation, and it creates a permanent ID. It is equivalent to tagging cattle and does not have to be done by a veterinarian. This would help our county shelters and would result in more lost or stolen animals being returned to their owners. It would also help identify stray dogs and cats that have bitten a person. The veterinarians support this bill. I do have an amendment that removes 7.2 from line 15 to clarify that the animal must be 8 weeks of age. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Senator, you have no questions.
Thank you, I yield.
Does any other senator wish to speak to the bill or the amendment? The chair sees none. All right, we're going to take up amendment number 1. Is there objection to adopting amendment number 1? The chair hears none, and amendment number 1 is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Question is on the passage of the bill as amended. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 43, the nays are 9. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed as amended. Chair recognizes the senator from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate Bill 102 be removed from the table.
Mr. Secretary, please read the caption of Senate Bill 102.
Senate Bill number 102 by Senator Jones of the 10th and others. A bill to be titled An Act to Amend Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to elementary and secondary education. So as to provide for a pilot program to plan, implement, and improve sustainable community schools, to provide for planning grants, to provide for operational grants, and for other purposes. Mr. President, on March 2nd, 2020, the Senate Committee on Education and Youth recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. It was submitted by Senator Martin of the 9th chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Education and Youth offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 102, a bill to be titled An Act to Amend Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the OCGA relating to elementary and secondary education, so as to provide for a certification program for whole child model schools, provide for reports on implementation and progress, provide for a short title, to provide for definitions, and for other purposes. That completes order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 10th has moved that Senate Bill 102 be taken from the table. Is there objection? Chair hears none, and the bill is taken off the table. The chair recognizes the senator from the 10th to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of this body, Senate Bill 102 is unlocking the promise, the whole child model certification program. This bill simply models work that DOE is already doing in regards to community schools, and this just memorializes their efforts. If there's no questions, I yield the well.
You have a question. Chair recognizes the senator from the 27th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
Yes.
Just want to clarify a couple of questions we talked about in committee for the benefit of this body and for my own recollection. Can you clarify for us whether or not local school districts are required to do anything if we pass this bill?
I'm sorry, say again.
Can you state whether or not local districts are required to do anything if we pass this bill?
Absolutely not. This is a voluntary program that Department of Education has started, and they're really targeting schools that have been on the PBIS program in order to increase performance and increase graduation rates.
Thank you, Senator.
Sure.
You have no more questions.
Thank you. I ask for your favorable consideration for Senate Bill 102.
Any other senator wish to speak for or against Senate Bill 102? The chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 50, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Chair recognizes the senator from the 48th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I make a motion to move Senate Bill 327, substitute, from the table.
Ms. Secretary, can you please read the caption of Senate Bill 327?
Senate Bill number 327 by Senator Karenchak of the 48th and others. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 34 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding labor and industrial relations so as to require employers to provide reasonable break time to an employee who needs to express breast milk for a nursing child and for other purposes. Mr. President, on February 27, 2020, the Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted by Senator Jones, the 25th Chair. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Insurance and Labor offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 327. A bill to be titled an act to amend Chapter 1 of Title 34 of the OCGA relating to general provisions regarding labor and industrial relations so as to require employers to the extent reasonably possible to provide a reasonable break time to an employee who needs to express breast milk for a nursing child and for other purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Senator from the 48th has moved that Senate Bill 327 be taken off the table. Is there objection? There is objection. All those in favor of taking Senate Bill 327 off the table, vote the yea switch. Opposed, nay. The Secretary will unlock the machine. On the motion to remove from the table, the yeas are 46, the nays are 2. The motion has prevailed, and Senate Bill 327 is removed from the table. The chair recognizes the senator from the 48th to speak to Senate Bill 327.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate being added to the calendar today, and it's with great honor that I bring you Senate Bill 327, which would guarantee mothers who return to work the ability to pump breast milk in a sanitary space at work. This bill is an update to a bill passed into law almost 20 years ago. In fact, two of the co-sponsors of that bill from 20 years ago are still with us, Senator from the 55th and the Senator from 35th. Sorry, I didn't get that number first time. It was passed into law almost 20 years ago, which recognized the public health and economic benefits of supporting mothers who return to work and want to still be able to take care of their young families. We are giving employers flexibility to work with their employees in determining when and where would qualify for a break to pump and exempts small businesses if that break would be unreasonable. This issue was brought to us during the off-season. Many of you heard from the Burt Show. This has been very active in our community, and the fix before you is the result of a bipartisan effort that we can all take pride in. I'd like to specifically recognize the senators from the 8th, the 35th, the 38th, the 25th, and the 9th, and in particular, the chairman of Insurance and Labor, the 25th, the senator from the 25th, for working in a bipartisan manner to make sure we accommodated both sides of the equation so that this would work for the employer as well as the employee. I know it's late this evening, so I'll keep my presentation short and I'll yield for any questions.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 56th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator, first, let me commend you for this excellent bill. Do you have a fiscal note on this bill?
As you're aware, sir, there is no fiscal note required here. This is between the employers and the employees in the in private industry.
Just want to make sure you knew. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you paying attention to the dollars.
The chair recognizes the pro tem for a question.
Senator Yield,
Yes, sir.
where do the former federal prosecutors stand on this bill?
It's funny you should ask. They overwhelmingly support this bill, and in fact, this issue came to light when I was a federal prosecutor. We did have to find places to be able to pump, to have milk for our children, and it actually was an issue. So I appreciate that great question from the President Pro Tem.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you were a federal former. You were.
Yes,
Well,
sir, for
thank you
8 years.
Thank you for imparting that on us.
Yes, sir, thank you. And in fact, I had a big case up in your area in Gainesville that I prosecuted, so I'm sure we worked together in some way, shape, or form even back then.
Do you continue to yield?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes the senator from the 27th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Yes, sir.
To follow up on the pro tem's question, I'm curious if you have any idea where the veterans happen to stand on this bill.
The veterans. I assure you, the veterans support this bill as well. It has actually been an issue for working women as in the military, and there has been accommodation made. But as you are aware, Senator, I know you've heard from many of your constituents as well, it is still an issue that we all need to work on, and that's why it's a great bipartisan effort to help mothers who return to work be able to take care of their families.
Thank you, Senator.
You have no more. Chair recognizes the senator from the 28th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Senator, I think we can both agree you've been to that well about every 5 minutes since you got here. Is it or is it not true, and this is a legitimate question, is this your first bill?
Actually, it is not. You'll remember last year, Senate Bill 58, the whistleblower protection law, was actually the first bill that I brought as a state senator, and this body passed it by a wide margin. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. There was some debate out here, and I just wanted to clear the air for you.
Senator, you have no more questions.
Thank you. I ask you do pass, and again, I thank all the bipartisan work here, and I also want to thank the Burt Show and all the constituents who have paid close attention. Thank you.
The chair recognizes our majestic rules chairman to speak to the bill. Senator, the hour's late. He waves. That was a great way to start wrapping this up. Does any other senator wish to speak to Senate Bill 327? The chair sees none. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to adoption of the committee substitute? Chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 49, the nays are 1. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. our pages in here. We have some very special friends of ours that have helped us out all day today and stayed here late in the hour. Let's stand up and thank our pages. Come on down, come on down. Great job, thank you. Chair recognizes our majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Friday, 13 March 2020.
Mr. Secretary, your announcements, please.
All committee meetings are now canceled. That please order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the Appropriations Chair for an announcement.
For members of the Appropriations Committee, just be advised that we have canceled all of the subcommittee meetings we had planned for tomorrow, Monday, and Tuesday. We'll watch the situation carefully and be back in touch. And over the next couple of weeks, when it seems the appropriate time, we'll reschedule those meetings. But appreciate your cooperation. I hope you have a safe trip home. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes the Rules Chairman for an announcement. Or are you speaking to the last bill?
All right, I have been gotten. I mean, that was a good one. Mr. President, I just want to talk about the Rules Committee. The next Rules Committee will be the morning that we come back into session. We will create a small calendar for the House bills that are now over and give the Secretary of Senate time enough to create the books and put the paperwork out. So that's the way we'll handle this. And also, all the committee chairs here, your committees are full of House bills. So until they move out of there, they will not be with me. But anyway, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President.
The Majority Leader has moved that we stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Friday, March 13th, 2020. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Senate stands adjourned. Dinner. Forgot to tell you all a very important thing. Dinner is here.